This is Paul Nobles from ETPform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
So we have kind of a smallish class, which is actually kind of fun. Usually we can delve a little deeper into some of the questions that people have, and so it kind of makes it a little bit more interested. Look a little blotchy with the the fall weather right now isn't doing so great on my skin. Um, we've had such weird weather here in Minnesota. It's like freezing cold one week, and I think today it was like 83. So
Oh,
it's just
wow.
yeah, it's kind of a shocker. So you had a question from one of the Science Lab members who actually normally is able to make the webinar, Teddy, but he can't make it tonight. And so what was his question?
Teddy asked, he said that he has two control days back to back coming up, and should he do anything differently or do them both normally? And I guess he's watched some prior webinars and have heard you state that you didn't usually do too well with two back to back control days.
No, actually, I'm starting to find more and more that it sort of depends because I was doing things where I had, this challenge going on, and I was trying lots of different things. What I've found more than anything is on a control day, I need to get in 150 grams of carbs, sometimes up to 200 grams of carbs. If I don't, I just drag, and it doesn't feel right. Now, is that the situation for Teddy? Maybe not. Maybe that's what feels right for him. But in my view, you'll often, like, if you go like super low carb on one given day, right? You'll just end up like urinating all day long, because your body just kind of wants to let go of that. I don't know that that's necessarily a good sign that you're getting rid of fat, as an example, right? And so I think that having some level of carbs, like today, as an example, I was kind of dragging. What felt right this morning was I had some oatmeal, which I almost never have oatmeal. But for some reason, I've just kind of wanted oatmeal lately. And so I had some oatmeal with a scoop of cookies and cream Progenics, and really liked that. Didn't know if I was going to WOD today or not. It certainly wasn't around my WODs. A lot of people who are familiar with Eat Perform, and a lot of these people in these classes are kind of new, so we need to kind of run through the things with them. But in general, we like you to have your carbohydrates mostly around when you work out. And oftentimes, if you ask, well, when should I eat the rest of my carbs, our answer typically is later in the evening, just because it allows you to sleep better. And I know that that's contrary to virtually everything that anyone's ever been told. But as you can tell, these are guidelines, not rules, because the first thing I had this morning was oatmeal. And so what we ultimately want is to give you guys some parameters and rules, but we want you to feel like, what works for you. The last thing we want to do with a control day, I think the most important thing with the control day, in describing what a control day is to people, a control day is lower carbs and lower calories as a general rule. Usually if you take your carbs from, say, 250 to 300 grams of carbs down to 150, that's roughly 600 calories. So usually that offsets not being active for that day. But notice how I didn't say go down to 0 carbs, because I think what ends up happening in that scenario is, one, you'll be dragging for that day, and then two, it kind of carries over to your workouts. And so I would say that if you're going to do a controlled day back-to-back, as an example, what I would do is probably be a little bit more strict on the first day than I would on the second day, because you're just going to start dragging too much. But on the second day, that night you want to have some carbohydrates no matter what time you work out the next day. You know, maybe save the good majority of, so if you're going to eat 150, have 50 earlier in the day, save 100 for the evening, obviously from starchy sources, and then, you know, you'll go into your workouts the very next day. So basically you're lowish carb, 100 to 150, probably closer to 150 for a guy, maybe even 200 for a guy. It sort of depends on what feels the most right to you. I'm telling you, for me, I'm starting to figure out that 200 is the most right for me, because people have this impression, and I have to say, like, even in my personal life, I mean, April's constantly on me. She's like, you eat too little carbs, you know, and I have to say, I do fall into that trap a little bit, you know, just because I don't track my food as diligently as other people. The thing that I'm most concerned about is protein. But what I'm finding is if I can keep my starches up, even on control days, I feel better, carries over to the next day, and I get recovery better. And so, what are your thoughts on what I'm saying there, April?
Um, I agree with what you're saying to some extent. I would say in obviously we know the inside joke there. I would say in Teddy's question, the scenario that I would suggest would be depending upon what time he trains that third day, the training day that he's going into. If he's going to train early, I agree with basically what you said. Get aggressive the first day, not as aggressive the second day. Going in
Aggressive meaning lower calorie, lowest.
exactly, or the lower, like his normal control day, and then the second day not getting as aggressive with going as low. If he trains later in the day, like in the afternoon or even like a late PM workout, I would say that he could treat both of them as normal control days, and then he'll have ample enough time to carve up prior to training.
To give an example, for a male, right? Let's say that male, you can see my dog in the background. Let's say that male eats 300 grams of carbohydrates on workout days, then he goes down to 150 or 200. Like we said earlier, 100 grams of carbs is 400 calories. So if he was eating, say, 2,800 calories, he goes down to 2,400 calories. That's ultimately probably going to do what he needs to do. In the case of a woman, you know, you could use a similar example. Maybe she's eating 250 grams of carbohydrates. She goes down to 150. She was eating 2,500 calories. Now she goes down to 2,100. And that's how we try to get to it. Keep fat manageable. Is that a scenario where you're working at a deficit? It sort of depends, right? It sort of depends if you're normally eating 2,500 calories. You know, if you're normally eating 1,800 calories, trying to go to 1,400 calories, that is not usually a good formula. And what we ultimately see is that that's what causes plateaus and people to struggle. So is that helpful? So the inside joke is that we were at the Granite Games in Minnesota, and someone was having me do an impression of April. If you guys stay on later, maybe I'll do the impression. So Ariel is asking, "Hi, I'm just coming off paleo, looking to try something new to lean out so that I'm not dragging during my training. Do you not eat oatmeal because of any particular reason, or is it just not something you prefer to eat yourself? Also, what other carbohydrates do you recommend to utilize?" Well, like I just said, I had oatmeal today, but I think what she's asking is, you know, do you avoid oatmeal normally? And yes, I do avoid oatmeal, but not for the reason that you think. Normally my workouts are in the evening, and I'm like most people, I think of oatmeal as a breakfast food. I don't think of it as a dessert, as an example. I guess this morning's would have kind of been kind of desserty. It was real chocolatey and things of that nature. But certainly, if it worked for me, I'd be fine with it. I don't know that I would eat it every single day. I do like Greek yogurt. As an example, I'll eat Greek yogurt. I tend to eat two big-ish meals. Some people obviously like to have three meals. And some people like to have more. Um, but I tend to like two big-ish meals mostly because it's convenient for me. So I eat a little bit later in the morning. Oftentimes, I will end up having something that's kind of lowish carb, uh, you know, steak and eggs, as an example, pork chops and eggs, Greek yogurt with whey protein. Yeah,
Uh,
that's what were you gonna say?
I know you usually do the Greek yogurt with the granola too.
Yep, Greek yogurt with granola. So I'm not against oat. I mean, honestly, oatmeal is better than granola because it's starchier.
Well,
As
I actually eat oatmeal almost every day. And I don't eat it in the morning. I eat it as a dessert, and I usually eat it around 4 o'clock every day. And I make it very chocolatey, dark chocolatey. I can't eat gluten, so I actually buy the gluten-free oats. So that may, with her coming off paleo, it may make her feel a little bit better by using the gluten-free oats.
yeah. But no, we don't really have, if a food doesn't work for you, as an example, we would suggest you not eat it. Like we don't go, okay, well, here's your starchy foods. Even though it makes you feel uncomfortable, you should eat that, right? But um, avoiding a grain, as an example, because it causes wheat belly and things of that nature. The science on that pretty much has been debunked for a while now. Unless you have celiac, there does seem to be a group of people. I don't know what your experience is with this, April, that are bothered that don't have celiac. Is that your scenario?
That is absolutely my scenario. Absolutely.
And I mean, there are people that would say, there's just no way that exists, and we just talk to too many people that it's not mental. You know what I mean? And I don't know why it is. I do wonder if dosing maybe could be a little bit of an issue. Do you find that any and all gluten messes with you? Like
I
if you had a small amount of gluten, would it be a problem?
It probably wouldn't. I actually have not tested it out. I ate gluten all my life, and I never had a problem with it. I started having some gastric issues, and by doing an anti-inflammatory diet, I actually dropped gluten and dairy, and it completely healed my symptoms, and they were like horrible symptoms. I do think my bigger issue is dairy versus gluten, and I have had, some gluten here and there, just a little bit. So it's not, some deathly reaction of, I feel like I'm going to die or anything like that. So
Yeah. She is asking what other carbohydrates do you recommend. Recently, I have gone to just baked fries. I don't mind eating sweet potatoes, but kind of was in a sweet potato rut for a long time there, and so now I'm kind of in a baked fries rut. Just baked white potatoes. That's something that works for me. Another thing that really works for me and seems to work for just about everybody is rice or rice noodles. Um, I think you'll see good response with that. I think one of the things that sort of happened to us. I always talk about on Instagram and stuff. You see a lot of pictures of Chipotle. Um, but you start to then go, okay, well, I can start eating rice noodles, and so every now and again, my wife and I will go to Noodles and Company and get like the peanut saute or whatever. The problem with I don't know what it is, but for some reason Chipotle doesn't affect me negatively at all. But like something like noodles does, and it's because of the sodium. 1,000%. They put so much sodium in their stuff. And it's kind of odd because the the Chipotle also has sodium, but for some reason the sodium in the rice is a good mix, and then you would think that the rice noodles from Noodles and Company would also be fine, but usually what I see is the day after I eat at Noodles, I feel a little bloated. Usually the scale is up, and then I have to have some water, so we don't really have it all that much either. And so I think it's probably a reaction, to some combination of spices, or maybe actually the white rice helps load better, but it's just noticeably different. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think the white rice in general is just much easier digested than like the
Yeah,
rice noodles and cereal and stuff like that.
yeah, no, I agree with that. But well, everybody's kind of being shy today. The So how are things coming with your training right now, April?
It's coming great, except for I'm getting a little bored. Hence why I was saying that I was contemplating starting the Hatch program.
I'm going to tell you, if you go on Hatch, you're going to be bored out of your mind.
What about even if I eat like 3,000 calories a day?
But it doesn't matter about eating. I'm telling you, it just gets so redundant, and then you're hurt. And it might be okay if you did back squats, but you're kind of missing the point of Hatch by not doing the front squats too. We actually do have another question. Um, Brian Kelly is saying, is the use of condiments bad for instant ranch dressing on broccoli? Well, here's your answer, Brian. I have right in front of you. I was just eating chicken with ranch dressing and Frank's. So Frank's is like the hot sauce they use for buffalo chicken, and I was just eating that before we started. And so I think that the deal with condiments is that, I mean, first of all, let me just say this. Both April and I eat Hidden Valley Ranch. We don't make our own damn ranch dressing and things of that nature. I mean, it's fine if you have the time to do that. I'm sure that that's great. But I had somebody say that homemade mayo is like the new ice cream, and I thought to myself, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say. Like, you just, I mean, fats do store as fat, contrary to popular belief. The majority of what we see is that people overuse fats. But in terms of condiments, like ketchup and barbecue sauce, I mean, if you're tracking them, okay, and you're making sure, I mean, the one thing nice about this is that Frank's, other than, it is a little high in sodium. That's what gives it a little bit of its flavor, but it's basically 0 calories. So I don't use a lot of ranch dressing, but that would be something I would consider. That way you can get a little bit more volume in without having all the calories. Because the issue with ranch dressing, and everybody always wants to talk about GMOs and things like that, and I'm not like pro GMO, right? But it's really the calories that's the problem, And so, yes, making your own stuff or chewing on nuts all day and things of that nature, those are just as bad. You're just trading one bad habit for another. If you can eat broccoli raw, God bless you. I cannot. I have to have something on broccoli to make that broccoli taste good. Now, could you move to something like balsamic vinegar or things of that nature? Those are things that I enjoy and definitely have on occasion. The one thing that I would say though is I have this salad that I make. It's with kale and Brussels sprouts and things of this nature. It's actually a mix, so it has like a small amount of cheese, dressing, and basically I just shake that up. The problem that you run into with using ranch dressing for broccoli is that you end up eating a lot of ranch dressing and not nearly as much broccoli. What I'd rather see you do is actually make a salad and have salads available to you, and then just kind of mix them up so you get a little coating of the dressing so it doesn't taste bad. and then try and use some different dressings that are more vinegar based and things of that nature on occasion. But I'm 100%, I mean, I eat ketchup. You know, when I eat those baked fries that I just talked about earlier, I eat ketchup. You know, sometimes my dog sees a rabbit outside, and so we get problems because of that. Kira, you have to quiet. April, can you take over for a second?
I can. I was going to say I actually have the similar opinion in regards to the ranch. I think if your goal is fat loss, as long as you're counting the amount that you're using, I see no issue with it. But the issue relies if you're not actually counting the ranch and you end up eating, 6 or 7 tablespoons of it, then, that can add a lot of extra calories in that aren't being accounted for. And then, of course, you end up, stalling on your fat loss and wondering what's going on, and all along you weren't counting the ranch. Also, I don't know if you've ever tried this, Paul, but I used to do this whenever the last time I dieted a long time ago. If you take a little bit of ranch, just a little bit, maybe like a tablespoon, and then actually add balsamic vinaigrette to it, and shake it up, you add a couple tablespoons of that, it actually makes like a creamy balsamic, and you actually get more dressing for less calories than all the calories from the ranch, and it's actually very tasty.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but as I've started to eat like an adult, and start to have vegetables and meats and things of this nature, my palate sort of changes, and so like usually I do kind of need the ranch dressing to be cut a little bit, or kind of like your creamy. The Frank's is similar to that. It's sort of funny when I put these recipes out to Instagram, like a lot of people end up eating them, which is kind of flattering. But I would love to hear more suggestions like that, because I am kind of a simplistic eater. I don't make these elaborate recipes and things of this nature. I don't have any problem if people want to do that, but it's just not something that jives with my life. And who knows, maybe it will later when I have more time and things of that nature. So I hope that helps, Brian. If you have any other questions, let us know. But I don't think that you need to be in the business of making your own condiments and things of this nature. And I think that when other sites put it out there that condiments are the thing that's stalling your fat loss, I don't think that that's sincere.
Or even avoiding, the ranch if you enjoy it. There's no reason to avoid it.
Yeah, I don't think that's reality. That's really the cause of most people's problems. Let's see. So Stacy is saying she just started Eat to Perform with a fellow lifter. We both have felt quite bloated. I try to maintain a minimal gluten diet, and I'm struggling to get the carbs in while maintaining the right balance on my fats and protein. She's roughly 139 pounds. She's 5'6" and very active. My goals are muscle gain and better performance. I have put on 15 pounds prior to ETP and want to continue these gains. Now, Stacy, I kind of remember you friending me right about the same time that someone else, and I think that she is also a pretty active person. But my suspicion is that, yeah, okay. So she's saying, Heather, here's basically what happens with Eat to Perform, and the thing with active people is that they start to want to add carbohydrates. Actually, I'm going to let April take this one. April, do you feel comfortable taking this one? Because I think this is something that you deal with often.
Absolutely. I would have a couple of questions as to what her caloric intake was prior to starting Eat to Perform, and if she actually gradually added in the carbohydrates, or if she just jumped in head first. Because I see a lot of times, typically, a lot of people, they see the numbers and they're like, oh, okay, I can do this, and then they jump in, head first, and then, a couple weeks later, they're, got the big Buddha belly, and they're complaining, about all this bloat and stuff. I do think that depending upon what your prior background is, there is some level of gradually approaching the intake, in my opinion. You know, if I don't know if she's actually hit her macros or if her ratios are, you know, are correct, or, you know, she's hitting everything properly like she should. But my suspicion is probably her carb intake was a lot lower, and she's probably jumped into the amounts.
Yeah, I mean, basically, what she says, she's added 50 to 75 more carbs, which sounds kind of low. Do you have any idea on what your calorie intake is daily, Stacy, and what it was previous to this? I mean, one of the things while she's getting us that information is that when you come from, you know, like in her scenario, you know, she's saying 50 to 75. I'm relatively certain she wasn't eating 200 to 250 previous to that. And so what happens in that scenario, and this is the basis for our book, is you kind of make your body inflexible. And so part of what we talk about is flexibility. Now, here's one of the things that I kind of thought that April might touch on, but we haven't obviously gone in depth with this, is for really active people that work out all the time, they don't have a lot of rest days. And so what happens when you don't have a lot of rest days is she's getting back the information. When you don't have a lot of rest days and you just add carbohydrates and calories, well, that's kind of not eat to perform. In eat to perform scenario, you have some rest days. Those are lower calorie, lower carbohydrate, and that's what kind of keeps that bloat away. But if you're always working out, you probably have to, you know, try to adjust it with your calories and carbs. What she's saying, though, I think we figured it out here. And she said right now she's 2,500 to 2,800, prior maybe 2,000. So she's up 500 to 800 calorie. I wasn't tracking, just trying to eat more.
It sounds like to me that her intake is actually quite high. It sounds like 20 for her.
Which is fine. Okay. Go ahead.
If she's coming from an average of 2,000 calories, even say 2,200, if she's, you know, if she's very, very active, you know, even if she trains, say, 5 days a week, I think jumping into 2,800 calories is a recipe to add some body fat. You know, you're going to add some body fat if you jump that high, because you know, for her to get up to a 2,800 calorie standpoint, she would have to slowly build up to that high. 2,500 definitely, but 2,800 I think is too high for her.
Okay, but there's another point here. Okay, she says she's bumped 50 to 75 grams. Okay, I'm just going to do 50 because that's the easiest math. That's 200 calories. Okay, let's say that she was eating 2,000 calories, and now she's eating 2,800 calories. That's 600 more calories of protein and fat. That's not 600 calories of carbohydrate, okay? And if I know anything, the one thing that I know is it's probably mostly fat, because this community does not have, and you know, it's not that we believe that fat is negative, but let's say that of that 800 calories, 200 of it is carbs, 200 of it is protein. I mean, basically you're looking at half of that probably coming from fats, and so that's why you feel bloated, not the carbohydrate, right? It's just the overall calorie consumption that needs to be addressed for really active people. So when we say you probably need to address it, I think what April's saying is really relevant. You can't just dive in. But the other thing that's really, really important is as you go up to 2,500 to 2,800 calories, you were probably eating enough fat already. Don't add more fat. That's the answer. That's probably the answer to what would make you both feel more right. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. I totally agree because once you reach, an adequate amount of, of fat intake, you're basically just increasing carbs from there, working up, your carbohydrate intake.
So, Stacy, you are tracking right now. See, this is what I love about having smaller classes. She says she's just having problems cutting all the fat and finding the carbs, I guess. Um,
That's
so
that's
she,
actually the easy part.
yeah, that is the easy part. The question I want to know though is what are your macros right now? Do you know that? Because one thing that we've always seen is that a lot of times people will start just eating more. Their coaches have been telling them, you don't eat enough, and so they just start eating more, and then they just eat. I have wrote them down. I just redid them today. If you can give me any clue as to what those macros look like, I think we'd be able to help you. Also, the other thing too is have you talked to April in the forums, because I have a feeling that these are issues that would be able to work through really quickly. So I'm going to wait for her to get me back her information and then move on to Stephanie real quick. Stephanie's saying she just started Eat to Perform and using the recommended macro amounts. I'm assuming that she got from someone in the science lab, one of our team. When is a good time to reevaluate my plan and whether or not I need to make adjustments in my macro amounts? I know changes in my body take time, so I'm trying to be patient before making more changes. Well, the question is how long have you been doing it? And what are you unhappy with at this point? Because I think that it would be easy for me to make an assumption that you want to gain muscle or you want to lose fat or whatever, but oftentimes that ends up being wrong. So if you could get us back what your goals are, what you don't think you're seeing, and what your macros are right now, then we can start to have a discussion about that. And we have plenty of time to be able to do that. So if you could give me that information, that would be helpful. Ariel is also following up. There is a rabbit in my backyard, and it's freaking my dog out. On this subject, if I'm training 5 to 6 days a week for about an hour and 30 minutes a day, is 1,440 calories too little? Yes, it's way too little. I weigh between 135 and 137. Looking to get down to around 125 to 127. Am I shooting to increase my carbs or increase my protein? Well, we don't need to have a discussion about either of those things because your issue is calories. You need to stop dieting for a little bit, probably up to 2 to 3 months. You're basically just trying to hammer and do things the hard way, Can I ask you a quick question? How long have you been eating roughly 1,440 calories? And are you seeing results at that low calorie amount? Or are you stalled? So Stacy got back to us, and she's saying protein 139, carbs 250, and then fat 95. So let's see. So we got basically 1,600 plus roughly 900. So she's right at 2,500 calories.
So I think Stacy used the calculator correctly because I actually ran her numbers a second ago. I think that her fats are too high. I would recommend tapering those down just a hair and increasing her carbs because I think that she should at least be around the 275 range for carbohydrates.
Well, let's keep her around 250 for right now. The difference between 250 and 275 isn't that great.
Yeah.
But what she does need to address is the fats. If she can get the fats closer to, say, 70 grams, maybe 75 grams, that would make a big difference.
I totally agree.
Protein could be a little lower. I mean, I don't mind doing 1 gram of protein, but that's not necessary. Um,
I
uh,
think, my opinion, because she's only 139 pounds and because her goal is to gradually add muscle,
yeah.
personally, I would stay at 139.
See, but I think that she's already gained a lot of muscle, and so
She said she still wanted to contain. She stated that she still wanted to gain more muscle.
I think she can gain muscle. I'm okay with the fats being lower. I would not mess with the carbohydrate. What I'm trying to do is get her calories lower so the bloating starts to go away. You see
I
what I'm
think if
saying?
she kept her carbs where they are and dropped her fats from 95 grams to say 75 grams, that's going to be 180 calorie difference right there. That's going to drop her closer to around 2,200 calories,
Yeah,
which would be, kind of more of a moderate range.
yeah. Let's see. So Stacy got back to me, but she said today I managed 36% carbs. See, I don't really like when people give me percentages. I need the macros. Do you feel that too? Because like I
No.
don't have, yeah, I mean, yeah, I could sit here and try and do, but she's saying she's only hit 2,020 calories. One thing I need everybody to understand is that if on a day where you hit 2,020 calories and you feel fine, just roll with it. It's not that big of a day on any one given day, Um, but the good majority of the time, you want to try and hit your numbers, and you want to try. But if as an example, you're feeling a little bloated and you're feeling good at 2,000 calories, roll with that because I think right now your calories are too high because your fats are too high. You know. Um,
And also another thing could be because I see a lot of members who complain about being bloated. They weren't necessarily really coming from a lower calorie intake, and look at their food diaries, and their sodium and their fiber intake is pretty high, and that plays a big factor in regards to that.
yeah. No, I agree with that. Um, So Stephanie's saying she's been doing ETP for about a month. My macros are 140 protein, 225 grams uh, on workout days, 125 grams of carbs. Fats are 75. Goals are fat loss and muscle gain. Um, I, you know, okay, I want to speak to that because I read a great article about that. But I don't feel like I'm losing body fat just yet. I do feel my strength is improving, that I'm able to do more and work harder in my WODs, and I think that's because of my higher intake of carbs. Well, first of all, your intake of carbs is actually not that high. Um, and that's great that, you've gradually moved there. I think you jumping the gun and saying, well, I've been doing this for a month, I'm feeling better, my workouts are better, but I'd like to sacrifice all that and you'll get some fat loss. The fact of the matter is that the fat loss and muscle gain, you can get that in a lot of your instances where you're coming from under eating backgrounds and things of that nature. And so if you're not seeing a lot of weight gain, you're probably seeing fat loss. It's just more gradual than you'd like it to be, right? But here's the problem with fat loss and muscle gain. One of the reasons why we sort of separated our challenges. Um, the idea that you could lose fat and gain muscle is a bit of a myth. Okay? Now, as I'm saying that, we have many people that do that. But the reason why they do it is very simple. They were coming from an under-eating background. Most of them were under-eating protein. They weren't eating enough carbohydrates for protein turnover, and their workouts were horrible, right? So you fix the protein, you get adequate carbohydrates, adequate energy, WODs get better. Guess what happens? You end up gaining a lot of muscle and not a lot of fat, okay? You, on the other hand, are wanting to jump the gun. You're a month in, and you want to basically go back to what I believe is bad behavior. I'm telling you right now, looking at your macros, that I wouldn't want to see you lower your carbs. I wouldn't want you to see you lower your fats, and your proteins. I mean, yeah, your proteins could be a little bit lower, but protein is one of the things that's most advantageous for, a situation like yours. And so typically I would not even want to consider something like this. I don't even think your macros are that high. April, can you do the math for me on what 140 protein, 225, and then 75 fats? How many calories is that? Or Stephanie, if you can give me, if you have it on the top of your head.
That is.
And she's saying that it's higher than she was eating before, which is great, and that's awesome. But you were trying that plan for so long. Why do you want to go back to that plan? It's really, you have to allow this plan to really, your body's still adjusting to
It's
this plan.
around. She obviously probably is coming from a lower calorie background,
Oh,
and
yeah. What's the
yeah,
calories right now?
conservatively, but considering that she probably works out, 3-4 days a week, I'm assuming. Her calories end up being 2135,
I mean,
2,135.
2135, and she's 140 pounds. So I'm sort of getting a few things mixed up here because
If she is in fact moderately active, I think that's kind of right on the money. If her goal is fat loss, if she is reducing her carbs down on her rest days to say 125, which ideally is going to drop her down to 1735 calories, if she's got at least 3 rest days a week, she should gradually see fat loss. I do think that because she's coming from a lower calorie background, a month is nowhere near long enough. I
nowhere,
have seen people,
nowhere.
that were coming from ultra low carb that takes anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks just for your body to wake up and start utilizing those carbs properly, and basically start,
In her defense, I do tend to jump the gun. In her defense, she says she's happy to wait to reevaluate, which is awesome. But Stephanie, I am a little curious on what or what is your activity level? How often do you WOD, things of that nature? Like on the 125 grams of carbohydrate days, is that 2 days a week, or is that, 4 days a week? Because that makes a big difference.
And also to add, to reiterate, like you were saying, if, she's basically improving in her workouts, she's, getting PRs, making gains, and her weight is staying stable, then that is a clear indicator, usually, that she is increasing some muscle mass.
I'm gonna give you my thoughts. And Stephanie, have you gotten a bod pod? Because my suspicion is that she didn't get a bod pod. Well, I don't want to say that. She might have gotten a bod pod. But if she didn't get a bod pod, that's where it gets really super hard. You know what I mean? Because if you gain, let's say that she gains, let's say that she's able to gain 6 pounds of muscle and keep her weight relatively stable. Okay, so she's saying she's going to bod pod right before the October 1st challenge, which is fine. I'll tell you what I'm going to suggest to you, and then you can do what you want. Because, I just genuinely believe this is probably going to be the right approach for you. My guess is, and Stephanie, has your weight been stable? Because obviously you've added a lot more calories. Have you been able to keep your weight roughly the same? Because I think your situation is real similar to Stacy, but you're just a month in. And so I think that would be helpful. She did say that she WODs 4 times a week. And so I think that that's a good schedule. It gives her some. She said, yes, I would say my weight has been stable. So that's a good thing, right? So here's the thing. If you had bod podded a month ago, right, and then you were to bod pod, let's say, a month from now, and you found out that you gain 6 pounds of muscle in that process, there's no reason that you wouldn't trust the process, right? Because you'd go, well, I just gained 4% body fat. I'm sorry, I lost 4% body fat because of the muscle gain. And so you go, well, this is awesome. I'll just ride this out as long as I can. Now, I will say for all of you guys, especially the ones coming from an under-eating background, you're going to see a lot of gains initially, and what works for you in the beginning isn't going to be what works for you in the end. Here's my suggestion to you, Stephanie, and I honestly think it works out real well as it relates to the challenges, but it also works out real well as it relates to the holidays. The holidays are sort of a difficult time as it relates to eating anyway, right? And so you're going to struggle around Thanksgiving, you're going to struggle around the weekend, there's going to be, holiday parties, things of this nature. My suggestion to you is stay on the current path that you're on until January 1st, and then we look at cutting some fat at that point. But I would really, really work on those 4 days a week. You really want to increase that work capacity, right? You want your lifts higher, your WODs better, your Fran time better, all these different things. And that way, when you get to January 1st, your metabolism is sort of rolling along. We take 8 weeks, whatever your fat loss goals are at that point. Once we have the bod pod, though, we'll be able to give you a lot better information because we'll have more concrete information in front of us. But right now, I don't know, what's your height, Stephanie? And then we'll just kind of move on. She's 5'3". So, that weight at 5'3" is certainly within, an acceptable range. I would expect that, going into the bod pod, the one thing that I would have you do is mentally walk in there thinking that it's going to be higher than you. I always tell people, like, prepare for the worst, right? And the thing that's good about preparing for the worst, if we find out that you still have muscle to gain, that's a good thing because that's the easiest thing to address when coming from an under-eating background. So if we can kind of keep your calories and macros where they're at right now, because I think they're set really well, now we don't have to work so hard at a cut in January because you've had 4 months of a diet break, and then this would give you a great opportunity to take an 8-week cut. If 8 pounds is the goal, we could try to do that. But you might find, like, for instance, you might find that you're a very muscular person, and what happens in that scenario is oftentimes she might be thinking to herself, well, I'd like to cut 8 pounds of fat, but if she's like 19% body fat, it's kind of hard to cut 8 pounds of fat. We sort of run through that with our CrossFit Games athletes, where they have expectations of trying to lose 8 to 10 pounds with no sacrifice of muscle, and that's really, really hard to do for very lean people. So I hope that's helpful. If you want to start, cutting previous to that, you could, but in my view, if your weight is stable and you're seeing improvement, don't just take a 1 month. This is the rest of your life. Don't just take a 1 month. Take a 4-month thing, and what you'll see with that 4 months is that if you go back to the low-calorie behavior, what you're going to see is it's going to get hard really fast. If you do this for 4 months, it'll be the easiest fat loss you've ever done in your life because you will have built up so much work capacity, your body's going to be revving along, and to be truthful, come January 1st, you're going to maybe go, you know what, I'm fine, 140, 5'3", hey, that's awesome, especially if you're gaining muscle, because I don't know what your age is like and things of this nature. But if you're coming from an under-eating background and you weren't improving in your WODs the way that a lot of other people were improving, what I think you'll see is that you're going to end up gaining some muscle. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Ariel did follow up with us. She was our 1,440 calorie person. She did say that she wasn't doing that very long. Let's see. I want to make sure that I didn't miss on this subject. If I'm training 5 to 6 days a week for about excuse me, increase my carbs, increase my protein. Okay. I just started on that about a few weeks ago. Been training with a stress fracture. Okay, she was a stress fracture person. So I haven't been doing too vigorous a training in terms of lifting. I've really only been able to row and do any upper body exercise since I got the stress fracture 3 weeks ago. I decreased my calorie intake. You can decrease your calorie intake, but what you're essentially doing by decreasing your calories that low is you're messing with your healing process, and when you are injured, your body needs nutrients to heal itself. And so what you want to do at that's just a horrible time to really diet aggressively. Now, could you diet a little bit? Yeah, but certainly not 1440. Certainly not if you're working out, 5 to 6 days a week. The other thing that I would suggest to you is if you're hurt, and I don't know where the stress fracture is, whether it's lower body or upper body, but everybody kind of thinks that there's not a lot you could do. One of the things that I like to recommend to people, and like I said, I don't know where the stress fracture is, but hiking.
I think she said it was lower body because she's only able to row and do upper body movements.
Okay. Yeah, it is really, really hard to get in.
My opinion with her is 5 to 6 days a week normally is very active, normally. Very active or extra active, depending upon how long her sessions are. Because she's only able to do it at a modified training because of her injury, I would suggest actually recalculating her macros and taking a moderately active setting and eating that on the days that she works out and then eating less on the days that she doesn't. 1,440 calories is probably in line with her basal metabolic rate, which is the calories that she needs to survive if she's in a coma. That's extremely too low, extremely.
Well, not only is it extremely low, but when you are not able to exercise the way that you're used to, usually you will see some atrophy in that scenario. And look, I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, and I didn't always do it correctly. And early on, I had an injury, and I did exactly what I'm telling you not to do right now. And the good news is I was bod potting all along, and I found out I lost 5 pounds of muscle. That was 5 pounds of muscle that I worked really hard to get. And so having to get that muscle back wasn't something that was really kind of awesome, because if you look at 5 pounds of muscle, I probably was 160 pounds at that time. Basically just multiply 5 times 1.6, and you realize, that it kind of sucks. Or divide. I'm sorry. So I basically lost 3% of my muscle, which was awful. When you see that result, you should hate it. So don't diet so aggressively. Try and maybe add in some low intensity that might be helpful. Rowing is certainly an option, but like April is saying, try and maybe, let's see, she says yes, it's in her foot. Um, she's 5'3", 21 years old, body fat is around 20%. What do you recommend in terms of calories? I recommend you just go to the calculator, you know, um, and do what April said to do. Or if you feel uncomfortable with that process, then go to the science lab and someone will set your macros for you and just tell them that you're injured right now. Um, we actually have a whole part of the forum for how people should deal with injuries. And
I think it's labeled injured and still eating to perform.
yeah, and so I would definitely take a look at that, because that's one of our more popular subforms, because people get hurt. Active people get hurt. That's just the way it is. But at 20%, the worst thing you want to do is lose a bunch of muscle and end up being 24% because you dieted too aggressively and you didn't allow your body to heal and keep the muscle that you've already earned. You know, but let your body heal. You'll be able to do a lot more once that happens. And some of that stress fractures and things of that nature, a lot of times those are signs of not eating appropriate amounts, working out too hard, too often, things of that nature. If there's any one thing that I've learned in the process of all these years, it's that I'd much rather work out better than harder, right? And you could say smarter than harder. I'd much rather work out 4 days at 100% than 5 or 6 days at 60%. And but I have to learn that lesson hard sometimes too. Today I saw a good wad, even though it was technically a rest day for me, and I went for it, and it just sucked. It's like I knew it was gonna suck, and it did suck, but whatever. You can't always be perfect. Brian say, does anyone know of a bod pod in the St. Petersburg, Florida area? I would say that in that area there's certainly going to be bod pods available. He was also asking earlier, coming from a paleo background of 1,200 calories going up to 2,800 calories is a little bit of discomfort. I would say, yeah, there's a lot of discomfort. This is why we need people to be in the forums. You can't go from 1,200 calories to 2,800 calories. I mean, that's just not possible. Now, I will say, if you're a really good athlete, what will happen is you'll be able to adjust quicker. Like Stacy's instance, she works out, she's very active. She friended me on Facebook recently, so I kind of saw some pictures of her and stuff like that. So she probably has some really good work capacity. She's going to be able to adjust to that faster than someone with not as good work capacity. That's the best way to say that. So if you've been working on fat loss and maybe not working on work capacity, or maybe you're not like the WOD killer or anything like that, you're going to have to be more patient, and you're going to have to gradually move up. And most importantly is you're going to have to kind of reverse diet, and so I would not necessarily go to that 2,800 right off the bat. I'd probably look at something like, I don't know, April, I'm thinking
I would actually suggest more of a slow increase, maybe 200, 250 calories a day for a week, and then increasing another 200, 250 calories over the course of, say a month or so, until he reaches up to the 2,800. So basically, if he was at 1,200, maybe increase to 1,500, and then eating that, and then increasing the following week, that type of thing.
I think to a certain extent you got to get the 2,800 out of your head for a little bit. I mean, if you're eating 1,200 calories, the problem with 1,200 calories is I wonder if, like, we're talking about cheat days and things of that nature. Because if your body wanted to be at 2,800, and you're eating 1,200, my guess is there were some Snickers involved every now and again. You
So
know,
you gotta be hungry eating 1,200.
yeah, you're just naturally hungry, you know? And so we were just talking about this today. Actually, April and I were talking about this today because we were kind of working on this coaching program. And you can write a 1,200 calorie program, but can the client stick to it is the problem. And the reality in most situations is they cannot stick to it, you know? And so they end up setting themselves up for failure and binge eating and cheat days and all this other type of stuff, which is one of the reasons why we hate the concept of cheat days, you know? You're saying 1,200 may be a little low, and yes, maybe a few cheats and Snickers. That's okay, Brian. You know, the thing that kills me is that there are some in the paleo community that are a little bit more diligent, and they almost guilt you into clean eating. In my view, paleo treats and things like this all have their place because they have calories that people need. And so if you end up eating a Snickers as an example, you were just hungry, And so all that guilt related to bullshit list of foods and things of that nature, we really try to get people out of that mindset. And so if we can get people out of that mindset, that ends up making a really big difference. Is that helpful, Brian? I mean, I just don't want to see you going to 2,800 and then I think what you would experience is similar to what Stacy experienced, but even in a bigger way. You're just going to end up being like bloated and uncomfortable. The other thing I want to say to Ariel is stop eating 1,440 calories and believing that that's the way to go. And whoever tells you that, fire them immediately. You're 21 years old. I work with CrossFit Games athletes on a daily basis. The absolute best thing that you can do, even in an injured scenario, is to eat adequate amounts of food that allow you to recover and get better over time. You will never have a window in your life better than the window that you have right now. And so using that to increase work capacity is so much better than decreasing everything. And what we always kind of point people to is the idea that subtraction is somehow magical, and it's really not magical. Now, recently, I cut, 5 pounds of fat, and I will probably cut another 5 pounds of fat in January. So I'm not suggesting that you wouldn't want to be concerned about fat. But if I was 21 years old, I'm going to tell you one thing, you'd never see me dieting at all. I'd be at the gym just crushing it. Because I'm 45 years old. My realities are different than your realities. At 21 years old, trust me, you're supposed to be eating 2,500 calories. You're supposed to be lifting all the weight. You're supposed to be just killing it. You have the opportunity to build a platform for the rest of your life, But and maybe April needs to say it to you, and maybe a man saying it to you is a negative, but April, do you have any regrets about your approach?
Absolutely. We've talked about this many a times. Too many years of dieting and not enough years of eating. If I had known, what I've known the past few years, if I had known this, 10 years ago, I could be, 8 years ahead of myself, and be so much better and so much stronger and so much leaner, with eating more,
But mentally,
Yeah.
mentally is the most important part,
Oh, absolutely. On the podcast that I did on the Half Size Me, with Heather, that was the big thing was, especially women, young women, her age, the teenagers, are too caught up in the dieting into the, I need to eat less, eat less, eat, salads, eat this or that. They're so focused on the body image and just constantly dieting. And like what you said, they basically think that less is better. Less is the way to go. And that's not the answer. Because in the end, you end up getting this disordered, mind process or disordered, eating of, you know, I can't eat the Snickers like Brian does. You eat the Snickers, then you got to go 30 days of eating clean to make up for the Snickers that you ate. And it's all bullshit. If you want to, I had a member today in the forum who posted a question and said he really enjoys ice cream and he wants to have a cheat meal with some ice cream, and when should he have it? And I replied and I was like, eat ice cream every day. If you like ice cream, there's no reason why unless you're going to eat a gallon of it. If you
Right.
want a serving of ice cream, eat your ice cream. There's no point in restricting yourselves of, a food that you enjoy or, that you like because you think it's going to make you fat or it's going
The
to start.
most, I think the most important part, well, one, we work with Danielle Horan, you know, now Ariel's 5'3", but she, weighs considerably less than Danielle. Danielle has abs. I think more interesting is Anna Hulda, the gal that we just put up some videos of. Anna's 5'5", you're 5'3", so that's a little bit different. Um, I don't think Anna would have any problem with me sharing her weight. She's 140 pounds. She's 140 pounds abbed up, and so like you saying 137 pounds, I want to get to 127 pounds. Um, I would say that there's probably compelling evidence all around you that the answer is getting stronger and more muscular, and that's ultimately where you're going to see your the best version of yourself. Not just physically, because physically is an important part of it, and that's great. We're all in this, to look better naked. That's awesome, right? But mentally is so important to really focus on using the way you eat the way that it's supposed to be done, right? And the way that it's supposed to be done is sometimes accelerated and sometimes subtracted. In your situation, it should almost always be accelerated. And the reason why it should always be accelerated is because that's how you're going to gain work capacity, gain muscle, and ultimately reach the physique that you want to reach. But in that process, mentally, it just changes you. And when you see all these world-class athletes that we work with on a daily basis, they just do not have the thought process of losing weight all the time. They only are concerned about being better physically. And if you focus on that being better physically part, the mental part just kind of happens. She said, thank you both. So I just calculated my TDE and it put me at 2,100 calories. Obviously, I can't go from 1,440 to 2,100 in a week. I would agree with that. So what do you recommend? I think what April said, can I go from 1,440 to 1,800 calories or so? Is that big of a jump? I think what April suggested is actually what you should do, is just add 200 calories and then 200 calories. What I think you're going to see, this is the strangest thing to everybody, but it's just very common, is that you're not going to end up gaining any weight in that process. And if you do, or if you start to get concerned, what I would suggest to you is be in touch with April and be in touch with all the people in the forums, because when you're trying to work out as much as you're doing, what you're essentially doing is causing an excessive amount of stress on a daily basis. And that's actually what is causing you to be plateaued. And so, but ironically, if you were a CrossFit Games athlete, okay, and you were 5'3", the weight you're at is the weight I would like you to be at, because it's my experience is that a 5'3" female at 135 to 140 pounds um, can be competitive. You know, now there are athletes. Obviously, it really depends on body style with women much more than men. Um, there are certainly some at 130, but there's not that many. Not that many. Um, Sam Briggs. You know, Sam Briggs put down that she was 130. I think she probably was 130 when she won the CrossFit Games, but it should be really telling that Sam Briggs is now 15 pounds heavier. She knew that for her to get better, that she was going to have to gain some weight, and I really applaud her for that. I think that that's amazing, because when you saw her struggle, it really was on the strength elements, and I think she's got the cardio elements down, and we just saw her actually at the Granite Games, and she's just a great lady, and just an awesome person to be around. So use those people as your example. But yeah, I mean, I would just go up 200 calories. Uh, don't avoid carbohydrates. Don't at your calorie level though, fats is a concern. Having your fats really super low ends up being a negative as well. But then try and work up to that 1,800 calories, so that it'll take you about 2 weeks to do. And then we look at, well, okay, if I'm at 1,800 calories and I'm not gaining any weight, well, maybe I should just go to the 2,100 calories like my body would like me to be at. So that would be something I would play with a little bit. And if you struggle, what I would suggest to you is to add in maybe another rest day, and then potentially some low intensity steady state work. Somewhere, if you can, walk comfortably and things of that nature, or maybe biking might be an option or something of that nature. So, well, guys, we went a little bit longer, but this was such a great, other than my dog barking in the middle. But you guys had great questions, and it was just an awesome podcast or webinar here. So, April, you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Good night, everybody.
And make sure, like we said, to visit April in the forums, all the other coaches in the forums, because what we're talking about right now is not the thing that you take and then just become the person that you're supposed to be. There is some trial and error, and so you want to have as much feedback doing that as possible. I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll see you guys in the forums. Talk to you later.